Part 69. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 682. Wang Yanyan roared, and the guards sent by the eldest prince trembled and dared not move forward. With the temper of the fourth princess, if they dared to disobey the order, the big knife would most likely fall on their heads. The eldest prince stood up and said angrily, "What are you doing?" Wang Yanyan glanced at Xiaoju and said lightly, "I want this person." The eldest prince said angrily, "What if I must kill him?" "If you want to kill him, kill me first." Wang Yanyan glanced at the woman with a bow on her back and said, "Ayu, take him away." The woman with a bow on her back jumped onto the platform and carried Xiaoju. "Come on," the eldest prince roared and said, "Whoever dares to take this enemy general away is a traitor to the grassland, shoot him on the spot." The several guards behind him immediately drew their weapons, and at the same time, Wang Yanyan's guards also aimed their arrows at them, and the battle was about to break out. The conflict between the eldest prince and the fourth princess was an internal matter of the Wanyan tribe. The leaders of these small tribes were all silent and dared not speak. Xiaoju felt uncomfortable being carried by the woman, but he was sensible and did not speak. Although he did not know what was wrong with the fourth princess, it was obvious that this was his only chance to survive. "Brother, fourth sister, why are you doing this?" A young man walked out of the crowd, looked at the eldest prince, and said, "Fourth sister just wants a person, don't hurt the harmony, put down your weapons." The third prince spoke, and the two groups of guards looked at each other and put down their weapons. The third prince looked at Wang Yanyan and asked, "This man is an enemy general. Why does Yanner want to protect him?" Wang Yanyan said, "He is very useful to me." The third prince said, "This man is an enemy general. We can't hurt the relationship because of him. Yanner can take him away, but don't forget to give an explanation to your elder brother and father afterwards." Wang Yanyan glanced at him, looked at the woman with a bow on her back, and said, "Let's go." The eldest prince watched Wang Yanyan leave with Xiaoju. Although his face was gloomy, he did not stop them. The third prince was right. For an enemy general, facing off with your own people will only make outsiders laugh. He was worried that he couldn't catch her handle, and this time she came to him. For an enemy general, she didn't hesitate to attack the eldest prince. If she didn't have a reasonable explanation, this matter would never be settled. Today was originally a ceremony for the public execution of the enemy general, but the fourth princess rushed out at the critical moment, tried her best to protect that person, and took him away forcefully. Naturally, the execution was also left unresolved. No one knew why the fourth princess acted out of character, and no one knew how the Wanyan tribe would handle this matter. The fourth princess took the person and went back to her tribe. The Wanyan tribe seemed calm, but everyone knew that this was just the calm before the storm. Xiaoju had been locked up in the tent for the past few days, and he had trouble eating and sleeping. Later, he was thrown on a horse by the woman with a bow on his back, and was jolted for dozens of miles. He was already dizzy and fainted halfway. When he woke up, he found himself in a tent, lying on a soft big bed. After a moment of shock, his face suddenly changed. He lowered his head to check his clothes and found that his armor was still on his body and he was not feeling unwell. He finally put his mind at ease. "Tell me, where did you get this pendant?" a voice came from the side. Xiaoju looked forward and saw the fourth princess of the Wanyan tribe holding the wolf tooth pendant given to him by Tangning, looking at him with a sharp gaze. Xiaoju had heard of the reputation of the fourth princess of the Wanyan tribe, but this was the first time he saw her. She had seen many grassland women, but this fourth princess gave him a completely different feeling. Although her clothes were also made of some kind of fur, they were very clean, unlike other grassland women, who could smell the peculiar smell from a distance of 10 feet. Moreover, her Chinese was very standard. If she changed into Chinese clothes, Xiaoju might not recognize that she was from the grassland. If it weren't for the fourth princess of the Wanyan tribe today, he would have died on that stage long ago. Xiaoju naturally didn't think that she was attracted by his beauty. The problem must be the pendant. He looked at Wanyan Yan and said, "A friend gave it to me." Wanyan Yan raised her eyebrows and smelled, Tang Ning. Xiaoju looked at her expression, and his mind flashed with what Tang Ning told him before he left. He said that if he was caught on the grassland, he should take out this pendant, which might save his life. At that time, he just thought it was a joke and didn't take it seriously. It was not until this moment that he realized that his life might really be saved by this pendant. Could it be that the fourth princess of the Wanyan tribe had some unclear relationship with the Tang? Xiaoju looked at her again and saw that although she was a grassland girl, her facial features were also very regular. She could be regarded as an absolute beauty. This possibility was extremely high. Wanyan Yan glanced at him and asked, "What is your relationship with him?" The he she called contained too much content. Xiaoju was almost certain of his guess. He smiled and said, "He is my brother." Wanyan Yan was stunned for a moment and asked, "Brother?" Yes, Xiaoju nodded and said, "I, Xiaoju, only have him as a brother in this life. We are friends who have passed our lives." Wanyan Yan looked at him, smiled, and asked, "In other words, your relationship is very good?" "Of course." Xiaoju patted his thigh and said, "I'm not bragging." Wanyan Yan raised her hand to stop him from continuing. She looked at Xiaoju and said with a smile, "Since you have a good relationship." Xiaoju immediately said, "Can you let me eat something first?" "Since you have a good relationship, I will settle the score with him on your head first," Wanyan Yan said to the woman with the bow on her back, "Tie him up, and get my whip." Xiaoju stared at her in a daze, unable to come back to his senses for a while. "Ah, it smells so good." Inside the tent, Xiaoju held a roasted lamb leg, chewing it while exclaiming, "This is the most delicious roasted lamb leg I've ever eaten." Wanyan Yan lay on the table, supporting her chin with one hand, looking at him and asked, "Do you really know each other?" "How could it be false?" Xiaoju swallowed a piece of lamb and said, "This pendant was given to me by him before he left." Wanyan Yan slammed the table and said angrily, "How could it be that he gave the thing I gave him to someone else?" "No, it's a loan, a temporary loan." Xiaoju changed his words and said, "I'll have to return it to him when I go back." Wanyan Yan put away the wolf tooth pendant. He stood up and said, "I will pay him back in person." Xiaoju gulped down another mouthful of water and asked, "You are not going to the capital, how can you pay it back?" Wanyan Yan smiled and said, "If I don't go, he can come over." Xiaoju curled his lips and said, "He can't even accompany his wife at home, how could he come to the grassland?" After that, he looked at Wanyan Yan again and asked in confusion, "Are you really fine?" Wanyan Yan gritted her teeth and said, "It's fine, but I have a debt with him, and I will settle it sooner or later." Xiaoju said, "If it doesn't matter, you can build a relationship. If you really want to have a relationship, find me and I will help you. I know him well, very well." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 683. The Wanyan tribe's public execution of the enemy general of the Chen state was widely reported at the beginning, but it ended abruptly in the end. For unknown reasons, the fourth princess robbed the man and went directly back to her tribe. The eldest prince took this opportunity to unite many tribal leaders and made suggestions to the Khan, demanding severe punishment for the fourth princess. The actions of the fourth princess Wanyan Yan were really incomprehensible, and no reasonable explanation was given afterwards. In order to punish the fourth princess, Wanyan Khan assigned her 4 tribes to the eldest prince, and the matter was settled. In this way, the eldest prince had more than 20 tribes under him, and his power steadily exceeded that of the third prince and the fourth princess, becoming the first Khan under the Khan. In a tent, the eldest prince took a sip of wine and said with a smile, I didn't expect to capture an enemy general and get an unexpected gain. I exchanged that person for 4 tribes. It's worth it? A figure stood beside him and said, I don't know what the relationship between the 4th princess and the enemy general is. She would rather lose 4 tribes to protect him. That makes sense. The eldest prince thought about it and nodded. Let someone investigate. Maybe we can get 4 more tribes. If she is colluding with the enemy, it would be the best. Then all the tribes in her hands will belong to me. In another tent, the 3rd prince's face was a little gloomy. He paced in the tent and said in a deep voice, I thought that the 2 of them would fight and both would suffer, but who knew that she would do nothing and let Wanyan take advantage of her? A middle-aged man behind him said, the eldest prince already has 20 tribes under his command, and the 3rd prince must do something as soon as possible, so as not to be left too far behind. You are right, I must do something as soon as possible, and I can't just sit there and watch. The 3rd prince thought for a while and whispered, Wanyan can capture the generals of the state of Chen, so why can't I, Wanyan, capture the generals of the state of Chu? He looked at the middle-aged man and asked, where are the people of the state of Chu? The middle-aged man said, although the state of Chu also has troops and horses entering the grassland, but those people are not easy to deal with. The reason why the eldest prince targeted the one from Chen state is because he suffered at the hands of the Chu people. How can I show that I am better than that loser if I don't do this? The 3rd prince showed a trace of sarcasm on his face and said, this is the grassland, it is our territory. If 1 times the number of troops is not enough, we can double or triple them. Are we afraid of a few Chu people? The middle-aged man nodded and said, those people from Chu state have been active in the Kairoulan River area recently. Xiaoju held a leg of lamb in one hand and mare's milk in the other hand, lying on a soft couch covered with sheepskin, burped, and said, I'm sorry, because of me, you lost 4 tribes. It doesn't matter. Wanyan waved her hand and said, it doesn't matter if there are more or less tribes, tell me more about him. Xiaoju said, what's there to say about him? Wanyan said, then do you want me to practice with you? Speaking of Tangning, there is a lot to say. He was the first in every imperial examination. Do you know what a 3 UN champion is? For example, our 3 UN champion is like the most powerful warrior of your Sushan people in decades. Xiaoju said, his wives are all as beautiful as flowers, especially his 4th wife, who is the most beautiful woman in our Chen state. Wanyan smiled mouth, and said, the first beauty, is it as beautiful as me? You, Xiaoju looked at her carefully and said, you look like this, you are just a maid in his family. No, his maids are prettier than you. Wanyan snatched the lamb leg from his hand and said, don't eat it, come out and practice whip skills with me. Xiaoju immediately said, no, I will tell you about his rebellion in Jiangnan, by the way. An hour later, Xiaoju was dry-mouthed and drank tea. Wanyan walked out of the big tent and handed a letter to the woman with a bow on her back, saying, send someone to deliver this letter to the capital and hand it to Tangning, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Capital. Tangning sat alone under the peach tree in the yard, staring blankly ahead. Today is the 3rd day of March, the 11th day since Sumei left, and I miss her. The capital has not been peaceful these days. It is the imperial examination season again. After the women's martial arts examination is over, the civil and military examinations are about to begin. Students from the capital have gathered. The inns and even houses in the streets are full, and the streets are suddenly crowded with people. This unrest is just that the capital has become lively. Nothing major has happened in the court. Tangning himself has something wrong, but it is just an ordinary transfer. Emperor Chen said before that after he has completed the 6 ministries, he will be transferred to the Shangshu province. A few days ago, he officially issued a transfer order. So far, in addition to the Minister of Personnel and the General of the Left Guard, he has also been assigned the job of Shangshu Zhuoken. The original Shangshu Zhuokan position is also retained, but the left-winger has applied for a family visit leave and wants to go back to his hometown to serve his elderly mother. He will not be able to come back for at least half a year. Filial piety comes first, and Emperor Chen is a famous filial son. Of course, he will not refuse a filial son's request. He approved his leave, so Tang Ning became the only left-winger in the Shangshu province. There was another incident that made him quite depressed. On the second day after Emperor Chen transferred him to the Shangshu province, Right Prime Minister Zhou requested to resign and return home. Mr. Zhou was originally the minister of the Ministry of Civil Affairs. Because of his old age, Emperor Chen transferred him to Shangshu province and took over the position of Prime Minister Feng, in order to give him a perfect ending to his official career. He does not need to go to the Yamen or deal with state affairs on weekdays. He only needs to work for 2 years to end his official career as the right minister. Now that he has only been in office for half a year, he is in a hurry to retire. There are rumors outside that he is afraid that he will be killed if he goes to Shangshu province. Like Feng Xiang, he has no guarantee before the end of his official career, so he simply retires early and leaves a clean reputation. These rumors were like sharp swords. Tang Ning wanted to clarify, but she couldn't defend herself. He thought about Sumei for a while, and then it was time to go to Shangshu. Walking on the street, many people passing by are dressed as officials. Starting from March every year in the capital, talented people from all over the country gather together, and many romantic affairs are inevitable. A hawker seemed to see that he was young and looked like he was going to take the exam. He came up to him and said, "This young man has an inscription written by the exam master. It only costs 1 tael of silver. Do you want to buy one?" Tang Ning asked in surprise, "What kind of inscriptions are there for the God test?" "You don't even know this." The man looked at him, took out a piece of paper from his sleeve, and said, "This is the 3UN champion Tang Ning, personally inscribed by Mr. Tang. If you buy a copy and offer it back, Mr. Tang can bless you in high school. A Jinshi can be promoted to the 3rd level in 1 year, and to the 10th level in 3 years. Tang Ning glanced at the paper in his hand. It was an ordinary piece of white paper with the words "must pass every exam" written on it. Looking at the handwriting, it looked a bit like his handwriting. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Does anyone buy this?" The vendor chuckled and said, "To be honest, I have sold more than 100 copies today. A piece of paper costs 1 tael, and 100 pieces of paper equals 100 taels. This fake inscription is faster than robbing money." If Tang Ning hadn't been short of money, she would have monopolized this industry and eliminated all the dens that manufacture fakes. Lose. Now, he naturally has no such interest, and he is too lazy to pursue the matter of them selling fake inscriptions and labeling himself a God test. He waved his hand and said, "Not interested." When the hawker saw him leaving, he thought the price was too expensive, so he immediately followed him and said, "The God test is too expensive, but the Saint test is cheap. Mr. Xiao is usually uneducated and has no skills. Last time he was able to get the 1st grade in high school. It depends on your luck in becoming a saint. His inscriptions are only sold for 500 yuan. Buy 2 and get 1 free. It is a very cost-effective gift to relatives and friends. It will definitely help you get into high school in one fell swoop." Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "He can't lift it himself, so how can he bless others?" You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 684. Along the way, Tang Ning encountered no less than 5 unscrupulous vendors selling God test inscriptions and secret question papers to him. The examiner who set the questions in the imperial examination had lost his personal freedom a month ago. He was surrounded by several guards who were watching him. He was always there when he was eating, sleeping and going to the toilet. The possibility of leaking the questions was almost zero. The secret test paper is unreliable enough, and the inscription test is even more nonsense. Tang Ning didn't have the heart to do these things. Xiaoju went to the grassland half a year ago. Now he couldn't figure out which grassland he was wandering on, so he had no time to write anything. However, even if it sounds unreliable, many people actually believe it. Regardless of whether they were really stupid from studying, or they were just trying to get some luck, Tang Ning couldn't help but feel a chill when she thought that they were putting incense sticks and chanting God's blessings, but what they were thinking about was themselves. The ministers were all located within the imperial palace. Like the Hanlin Academy, this arrangement was for the convenience of being directly responsible to the emperor. Since the 6 ministries became independent from the Shangshu province, the powers of the Shangshu province have been reduced to 5 out of 10, but the status of the Shangshu province is still very high. Almost all officials of the second rank and above in the court come from the Shangshu province. 3 divisions, 3 princes, and 2 prime ministers, these few people alone suppressed half of the court. What's more, all the documents submitted by the officials in the court, except for the 6 ministers and the minister who can directly answer to Emperor Chen, all have to go through the minister. Province. The officials of the Shangshu province are headed by the 2 prime ministers on the left and right. Now that the right prime minister has resigned, Wang Xiang is the only leader of the Shangshu province. Tang Ning had not interacted with the prime minister a few times. He gave the impression that he was funny and kind, and did not look like a prime minister at all. However, Tang Ning had been involved in the officialdom for a few years, and he understood deeply that the more such a person, the more profound the talent. An old fox who can hide things well, like Feng Xiang, can kill himself without anyone else taking action. Although there are many officials in the province of Shangshu, none of the 3 divisions and 3 princes are required to go to the Yamen. There are only 1 prime minister, left and right prime ministers, etc. who are really in charge. Tang Ning walked into the government office. Wang Xiang, who was reading the book, looked up and said, "It turns out that the exam is coming. Colleagues, why don't you come to greet Mr. Tang? I've met Mr. Tang. Hello, Mr. Tang. Master Tang, come this way, this is your place." Prime Minister Wang's tone was a bit strange. Tang Ning looked at Prime Minister Wang and laughed dryly and said, "Prime Minister Wang is joking. Those profiteers are using the name of imperial officials to commit fraud and seek unfair profits. We should take good care of them. I will let the Yamen below investigate those profiteers." Wang Xiang smiled and said, "But Mr. Tang's reputation as a god of examination is truly worthy of the name. None of the candidates in this class have achieved what Mr. Tang achieved back then. I'm afraid it won't appear in the next 30 years. Nowadays, everyone knows about the name of God test, and everyone knows it." Tang Ning cupped her hands and said, "Thank you, Mr. Wang, for the reward." Shang Shizhoucheng is actually the deputy of the Prime Minister, helping him handle some unimportant daily affairs of Shangshu province. Tang Ning sat down in his seat, and Wang Xiang handed him a thick stack of memorials and said, "This is today's memorial. Mr. Tang, take a look at it first. If it is not enough, we will not say." Tang Ning looked at the pile of memorials on her desk, and then at the few thin ones on Prime Minister Wang's desk. Prime Minister Wang smiled and said, "Master Tang is young and strong, and I am old. I can't read these alone, I am really unable to do what I can. Those who can do more work, and I will cause a lot of trouble to Mr. Tang in the future." Tang Ning was keenly aware that since he entered the Shangshu province, Prime Minister Wang seemed to be targeting him at every turn. Not only was it called a compliment in the beginning, but it was actually a sarcastic comment, but now he was deliberately arranging so many tasks for him, clearly to tire him out. Tang Ning recalled that the Prime Minister was a neutral faction in the court, and he would not side with Prince Kong. The relationship between Zhanduan Wang and Prime Minister Feng is not that good. He has never offended Prime Minister Wang, let alone his friends and gang members. Where does his mild hostility towards him come from? Could it be that he was worried that his coming to Shaanxi province would threaten his position? For Tang Ning to be able to threaten him, she must at least sit in the position of right prime minister, but the qualifications of a prime minister are very important. Who has not been a veteran of the government for decades, no matter how great his achievements are, short of it is impossible to sit on it within the time limit. At this time, Wang Xiang looked at him and asked with a smile, "Your Highness, Prince Run, is Master Tang teaching you, right?" Not sure why the Prime Minister asked this, Tang Ning nodded and said, 2 years ago, His Majesty asked me to teach His Highness Prince Run. It's a pity that I have been busy with the affairs of the 6 ministries and have never taught Prince Run anything. Master Tang, why should you be so modest? Wang Xiang stroked his beard and said with deep meaning, Master Tang has 3 wives and 4 concubines in his family. King Run is already surrounded by beauties at a young age. My granddaughter is only 12 years old. Just clamoring all day long to marry him, doesn't this count as teaching by words and deeds, as every teacher must have a disciple? Tang Ning finally understood why Prime Minister Wang was targeting him so much. But he will not take the blame for teaching Zhao Yuan bad. Before he came to the capital, Zhao Yuan had a younger sister from the Wang family. Moreover, when it came to deceiving little girls, Zhao Yuan was extremely talented and was self-taught. Tang Ning just needed to learn from him. Tang Ning felt unhappy because she had been blamed for nothing. She looked at the Wang Xiang and said angrily, Your Majesty has 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, and countless concubines in the harem. Why doesn't the Wang Xiang say that this is what your Majesty has heard and seen, and like father, like son? I hope Mr. Tang can set an example in the future and teach His Highness King Run some good things. As a minister, who dares to blame His Majesty? The Prime Minister glanced at him and walked away. Seeing that Tang Ning and Wang Xiang seemed a little unhappy, Shang Shuyushan hurriedly came over, took away more than half of the papers on Tang Ning's table, and said with a smile, Master Tang, Wang Xiang is too busy, let me help you read some. He took away the folder and changed the subject. I heard that Divine Doctor Sun has returned to Beijing and is living in the Tang family. I don't know if it is inconvenient for Divine Doctor Sun to be there. I have been feeling unwell these days and want to go see Divine Doctor Sun for a checkup. I heard that after Divine Doctor Sun returned to Beijing, countless dignitaries from the capital came to seek medical treatment. Mr. Sun just wanted to concentrate on studying medical skills, so Tang Ning set a rule for him to only see 10 people a day. Even though he was seriously ill, Shang Shuyushan looked full of energy and did not look like he was sick at all. Tang Ning looked at him and said, Mr. Sun is working on a new medicine. He can't move away. Mr. Wei, if you don't feel well, let me check for you, so you don't have to bother senior brother. Shang Shuyushan had long heard that Tang Ning was the junior disciple of Divine Doctor Sun. He was overjoyed and said, Then thank you, Master Tang. Tang Ning checked his pulse, shook his head and said, There is nothing serious about Mr. Wei's health, he is just a little overweight. Remember to exercise regularly and strengthen your body, so that you can be protected from most diseases. Shang Shuyushan touched his round belly, nodded and said, Definitely, definitely. The officials from Shaanxi province looked at him, their eyes shining brightly. Sun Chenai's reputation is very high among the powerful circles of the capital. People who are sick or not want him to see them. Unfortunately, he only sees 10 people a day, and he doesn't see any non-serious or urgent diseases. Even these officials from Shaanxi province can't destroy it. His rules. Now Divine Doctor Sun is not here, but his junior brother is. To become Divine Doctor Sun's junior brother, his medical skills must be equally profound. I heard that even the imperial hospital was helpless to cure concubine Shu's stubborn illness, and it was Master Tang who cured her. Zhou Si Lang Zhong mustered up the courage, stepped forward, and asked, Xiaoguan has been suffering from insomnia and dreaminess these past few days, with sore waist and backache, and cold limbs. Could you please Mr. Tang to help Xiaoguan take a look? As soon as he said this, more officials gathered around. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 685. Insomnia, backache, cold limbs, Lord Wu, you should pay attention to sex. How many wives do you have at home? Not many, only 2 more than Lord Tang. 6 is less, Lord Wu's kidneys should be replenished. Lord Han always has joint pain on rainy days. This is an old problem. I will bring you some plasters later. Dr. Zhao always has back pain when he bends over. So you should stop bending over. The officials of the Shangshu province are all a bunch of people who are just joining in the fun. If they really have a disease, they would have visited the imperial physician for treatment. Tang Ning symbolically helped them a few times. The man looked at it, then looked at Wang Xiang, and asked, do you want me to help Wang Xiang take a look? Wang Xiang shook his head and said, I have always been in good health, no need. Tang Ning said, Wang Xiang is wrong. Illness comes like a mountain falling, and illness goes away like pulling a thread. Many diseases have no signs at all. It is better to take a look. If there is any hidden disease, it is better to prepare early. Wang Xiang thought that this was Tang Ning's way of reconciling with him. After thinking about it, he nodded and stretched out his hand and said, then take a look. Tang Ning smiled, stretched out 3 fingers, and put them on his wrist. As he called, the smile on his face gradually froze, and then gradually disappeared. Wang Xiang's heart skipped a beat and asked, what's wrong? Tang Ning glanced at him, did not speak, just shook his head and sighed, with a complicated expression, saying, Wang Xiang, eat whatever you like these days. After that, he shook his head again and turned to walk out of the Shangshu province. Wang Xiang was stunned, his heart sank to the bottom of the valley. When he came to his senses and was about to ask Tang Ning for clarification, he had already walked out of the Shangshu province. The Shangshu province, which was originally noisy, became quiet in an instant. Shangshu Yushin looked at Wang Xiang and whispered, Sir, do you want to find an imperial doctor to see you? No need. Wang Xiang looked up at the door and said, I'll ask him when he goes to the yamen in the afternoon. Tang Ning did not come to the yamen in the afternoon, and he did not come for 3 whole days. The Shangshu province, which was usually lively, became suddenly quiet in the past few days. 3 days ago, there was a rumor in the Shangshu province that Wang Xiang was suffering from a serious hidden disease and that he would not have much time left. Everyone was in a low mood. Wang Xiang seemed calm in the past 3 days, but he looked much more haggard. The Shangshu Yushin came over with someone and said, Prime Minister Wang, Dr. Su is here. The old man behind him bowed and said, meet Prime Minister Wang. Prime Minister Wang stood up and said, excuse me, Dr. Su. No need. Dr. Su smiled and said, please stretch out your wrist, Prime Minister Wang, and I will help you feel your pulse first. Prime Minister Wang stretched out his wrist, and Dr. Su put 3 fingers on it. After feeling the pulse, he looked at Prime Minister Wang in surprise and asked, is Prime Minister Wang feeling any discomfort these days? Prime Minister Wang shook his head. That's strange. Dr. Su said, Prince Wang's pulse is also very stable, it doesn't seem like he has any hidden illness. Why does Prime Minister Wang think so? Prince Wang was stunned for a moment, and finally realized something, and said angrily, so he was bluffing me. Prince Su was surprised and said, who? Prince Wang gritted his teeth and said, Tang Ning. Ah, did Lord Tang make the conclusion that Prince Wang was ill? Dr. Su looked at him and said, then I take back what I just said. He looked at Prince Wang and explained, Lord Tang is the junior brother of Old Sun, and his medical skills are superb. I am far inferior to him. How about Prince Wang? Asked Lord Tang again. Prince Wang. With Dr. Sun in the Tang family, the family will not be able to have peace in the short term. He has favors for many dignitaries in the capital, and those people can't be turned away when they come with gifts. What's more, some people's identities are really precious. Can he stop General Ling from coming? Can he stop General Xiao from coming? These people could not be stopped, nor could they be stopped. In order to make the family quieter, Tang Ning specially set a visiting day for Mr. Sunday. Those who wanted to visit him or come to reminisce about the past were all concentrated on one day, which was simple and convenient. Many distinguished guests came to the Tang family today, and what Tang Ning did not expect was that Wang Xiang also came. He looked at Wang Xiang and said in surprise, "Isn't the Shangsha province very busy? There are many memorials to be approved. How can Wang Xiang still have time to come to see Old Sun?" "I came to see you," Wang Xiang snorted coldly and asked, "You said a few days ago that I was in poor health." Tang Ning said in surprise, "Nothing." Wang Xiang was stunned and said angrily, "Nothing, why did you sigh that day?" Tang Ning said in surprise, "The rabbit raised by my maid died. I just thought of this sad thing, so I sighed." "Why, is it not okay? There seems to be no rule in the Shangsha province that you can't sigh." He didn't sigh early or late, but he sighed when he was treating patients. After sighing, he didn't explain a word and disappeared for 3 days. If he was a doctor, he would have been chopped up and fed to dogs long ago. Wang Xiang looked at him and said with a sullen face, "What do you mean by saying that I can eat whatever I want these days?" Tang Ning smiled and explained, "Wang Xiang works hard for the country. Is it wrong for me to ask the Prime Minister to eat more good food and be nicer to himself?" He thought of something and added, "By the way, Wang Xiang is old after all. He should avoid extreme joy and sorrow on weekdays. It is also important to ensure sleep. I see that Wang Xiang is not in good spirits. Didn't he sleep well these days?" Wang Xiang's chest rose and fell slightly. He was worried about his serious illness these days. He couldn't sleep or eat well. It would be strange if his complexion was good. Wang Xiang looked at him for a long time, and laughed instead of being angry, saying, "What a petty Tang minister, even I have been fooled by you." Tang Ning was puzzled, "What are you talking about, Wang Xiang? I don't understand." Wang Xiang glanced at him and walked towards the inner courtyard with his sleeves. In any case, his health is good, which is always a good thing. He didn't want to argue with Tang Ning about this matter anymore. At this moment, he was going to visit Dr. Sunday. Decades ago, the Wang family owed him a favor, and they still haven't had the chance to repay it. Tang Ning walked back to the room. Old man Wang made up a story and wronged him for teaching Zhao Yuan bad things. Tang Ning let him taste the taste of making up a story, which was also a way to treat him in his own way. After all, it's not a good feeling to be wronged by others. Being older is not a reason to wrongly accuse others. At the gate of the courtyard in front, Wang Xiang had already put the previous incident behind him and stepped into the courtyard. The courtyard was very lively. Dr. Sun was surrounded by people. Fang Hong, the Minister of Personnel, and Fang Jie, the Vice Minister of Revenue, stood below. The Song brothers, Zhang Yan, the Minister of Rights, and Lu Ding, the Minister of War, were beside him. General Lu and General Ling talked and laughed with Dr. Sun side by side. Wang Xiang walked into the courtyard and looked at the scene in front of him. His steps gradually slowed down and finally stopped completely. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 686. Wang Xiang looked at the several figures in the courtyard with a look of surprise on his face. 4 of the 6 ministers of the imperial court came here today. The Ling family and the Lu family, the most powerful general families in the capital, Even 2 old generals came here. Although the Xiao family is almost in decline, it still cannot be underestimated due to the protection of the emperor. It is no exaggeration to say that the few figures standing in this courtyard, including high-ranking civil servants and military generals, already make up most of the court. This is without counting him, the prime minister of the dynasty. That is to say, Divine Doctor Sun has a special status. Many dignitaries in the capital have inherited his kindness, and he himself is not involved in court disputes. If anyone else except him had brought so many civil and military ministers together, he would probably be killed immediately. Aroused His Majesty's suspicion. Fang Hong saw Prime Minister Wang standing at the entrance of the courtyard and stepped forward and said, "Prime Minister Wang is here too, come in quickly." Wang Xiang walked forward with a smile, bowed his hands to Divine Doctor Sun, and said, "We haven't seen each other for more than 10 years, but my gentleman's style remains the same." Dr. Sun smiled and said, "It has been more than 10 years. How is Mrs. Wang's health?" Wang Xiang said, "Sir, I don't know. My father passed away 5 years ago." Divine Doctor Sun cupped his hands and said apologetically, "I was rude." Wang Xiang smiled and said, "Sir, you must not say that. If it weren't for you, my father would have gone to hell more than 10 years ago. Your kindness will never be forgotten by the Wang family." Wang Xiang's father was seriously ill. Fortunately, more than 10 years ago, Dr. Sun came to the rescue and brought him back from the dead. Everyone knew about this, and they were not surprised by Wang Xiang's polite attitude towards Dr. Sun. Divine Doctor Sun's medical skills are superb. Several imperial doctors in the imperial hospital are his disciples. No one does not want to have a relationship with such a person. Putting aside the past kindness, having him by your side at the critical moment is equivalent to an extra life. Who doesn't want to have one more life? Dr. Sun obviously didn't like such an occasion, and everyone noticed this. They stayed in the hospital for a short time, and after a brief chat, they all left. Wang Xiang said goodbye to Divine Doctor Sun, and when he walked out of the courtyard, he happened to see Zhao Yuan and 3 little girls playing in the courtyard. When a little girl saw him, she ran over happily and said, "Grandpa, why are you here?" Zhang Yan, the Minister of Rites, followed Wang Xiang out. Another little girl stepped forward and said obediently, "Daddy." Wang Xiang touched his granddaughter's head and asked with a smile, "Do you want to go back with Grandpa?" The little girl from the Wang family shook her head and said, "Grandpa, please go back first. I want to play with Brother Yuan for a while longer." Wang Xiang gave her a helpless look and said, "Then you come back early." Another little girl saw several people coming out and greeted them with a smile, "Grandpa Xiao, Grandpa Ling, Uncle Lu." Wang Xiang glanced at her and walked out of the Tang mansion. He suddenly thought of something and looked at Lu Ding, Minister of the Ministry of War, and asked, "That little girl just now looked a little unfamiliar. Whose daughter is she?" Lu Ding smiled and said, "That is the granddaughter of General Bai of the East Gate Guard. She has grown so big in the blink of an eye." East Gate Guard, Bai family. Wang Xiang nodded, said goodbye to a few people, and got into a sedan chair. Wang family. When a middle-aged man saw Wang Xiang coming back, he immediately stepped forward and asked, "Father, how are you? What did Dr. Sun say? How is your health?" Wang Xiang lowered his head and thought, and said casually, "My body is fine." Although he said so, his expression did not look like he was okay. The middle-aged man's heart sank and he immediately said, "If something really happens, please tell me, Father, clearly and don't hide it from us." Wang Xiang raised his head and said, "It was just a misunderstanding. I am fine. Dr. Sun has already looked at it for me." The middle-aged man looked at him and said in surprise, "What happened to my father?" "It's nothing." Wang Xiang waved his hand and said, "Yanner is also in the Tang mansion. You should send someone to pick her up early." The middle-aged man nodded and said, I understand. He thought of something, looked at Wang Xiang, and said, my child has something and I want to ask my father's opinion. Wang Xiang asked, what's the matter? The middle-aged man said, Yanner and Prince Run were childhood sweethearts and childhood sweethearts. Last time concubine Shu invited several married women to the palace for a garden tour, and Madame was also invited. Concubine Shu's words seemed to reveal that she wanted to marry the Wang family. The Prime Minister frowned and asked, Concubine Shu, are you getting married? The middle-aged man nodded and said, since Concubine Shu mentioned this matter, I am afraid she really meant it. Prince Run and Yanner were childhood sweethearts. I think this matter is not impossible. Wang Xiang waved his hand and said, this matter will be discussed later. Prince Run has been a passionate person since he was a child. His childhood sweethearts include girls from the Zhang family and the Bai family. It's not just my Yanner. Does concubine Shu want to be with our three families, getting married? After he said that, he walked straight into the room. The middle-aged man shook his head and was about to leave, but suddenly turned around and saw Wang Xiang paused in his steps and stood at the door, delaying in stepping in. He looked at Wang Xiang and said in surprise, Dad, what's wrong? Wang Xiang's eyes narrowed slightly and he murmured, tell me, does concubine Shu really want to marry our three families? How is this possible? The middle-aged man shook his head and said, how could the Bai family and Zhang family give their daughters to him, unless King Run can obtain the Datong certification, but how is this possible? Wang Xiang looked at him and said, Your Majesty is in good health. King Run will be able to take charge of his own affairs after waiting for 5 years. Why is it impossible? The middle-aged man continued to shake his head and said, Prince Duan has concubine Hui, the Tang family, and many wings in the court. Prince Run only has concubine Shu behind him. Even if Prince Run has grown up, why should he compete with him? Wang Xiang's eyes were slightly strange, and he asked, who said that only concubine Shu is behind Prince Run? He looked at the middle-aged man and said, his two uncles, one is the minister of the Ministry of Personnel, and the other is the minister of the Ministry of Hubu. His husband is General Zhou Xiaoyi, Minister Zhou Chang, together with the Lu family of the Ministry of War, and the Song dynasty of the Ministry of Justice. The Xiao family of Zhou Xiaoyi and the Ling family of Yulanwei are closely related. If concubine Shu intends to marry our three families, she will have the Zhang family of the Ministry of Rights, the Bai family of the Dongmenwei, and the Wang family of the Shangshu province. At that time, he will bring the civil and military affairs of the Manchu dynasty to the throne. If you catch them all in one fell swoop, why should Prince Duan fight with him? The middle-aged man was stunned and said in a daze, what father means? Prince Run is young and cannot come into the sight of His Majesty and the courtiers for the time being, Wang Xiang said with a thoughtful look on his face. The authorities are confused, but the onlookers are clear. Someone took this opportunity to play a big game of chess. The middle-aged man asked, who is it? Concubine Shu, the Fang family, the Tang family. Wang Xiang looked at him, paused and then said, maybe there will be our Wang family. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 687. Since Wang Xiang went to the Tang family yesterday, he did not come to Shangshu province for 2 whole days, nor did he go to court. He is the Prime Minister, the boss of the Shangshu province. No one can take care of him if he doesn't come to work. However, the Shangshu province already has one less Prime Minister. As a result, the task on Tang Ning's shoulders becomes heavier. She reads the excerpts every day and feels like vomiting. They are all trivial things. They are annoying to look at, but there is no point in not looking at them. The Prime Minister has been sitting in this position for more than 10 years. It is not easy to face this every day. On the third day, Tang Ning met Wang Xiang again in Shangsha province. He looked more haggard than a few days ago, but his eyes were still very sharp. Tang Ning looked at him and asked in surprise, "What's wrong with Prime Minister Wang? Is he sick?" "I am in very good health." Wang Xiang glanced at him and asked, "Does Master Tang know how to play chess?" Tang Ning shook her head and said, "I just understand a little bit." Wang Xiang said, "Want to play a game with me?" Tang Ning hesitated and said, "It's office time now. This is not good. All my colleagues are watching." Shang Shuyushan stood up holding his stomach and said, "I suddenly feel a little uncomfortable in my stomach. I want to go to the toilet." "Master Wu, you didn't say you wanted to go to the toilet just now. Why don't we come together?" Zhou Langzhon was surprised and said, "When did I say that I won't go? I want to watch Wang Xiang and Mr. Tang play chess." Yuji Langzhon put his arms around his shoulders, dragged him out, and said, "Let's go, we have to go sooner or later." Several people came out of the government office. The doctor from the left opened the hand of the doctor from the right and said dissatisfiedly, "Mr. Zhao, what are you doing? Wang Xiang is very good at chess, and I still want to learn how to play 2 games. Learning to use both hands." Yuji Langzhon glanced at him and said, "You have only been in this position for a few years and you are tired of it. Do you want to go to the northwest to practice?" Zhou Langzhon was startled and asked, "What do you mean? There is something wrong between the Prime Minister and Mr. Tang, didn't you notice?" Yuji Langzhon took a look inside and said, "Do you think you are older than the Prime Minister, or can you defeat Mr. Tang?" Hearing this, Zhou Langzhon couldn't help but trembled and never mentioned playing chess again. Yuji Langzhon looked at Shang Shuyushan and asked, "Won't Mr. Wang start a fight with Mr. Tang?" "Probably not." Shang Shuyushan shook his head and said with some uncertainty, "Master Tang is not such an imprudent person." After he said this, he didn't even believe it himself. He almost scared the king to death in the past few days, thinking that he had little time and was in constant panic. There was nothing more inappropriate than scaring the prime minister of a country. In the Shangshu Yamen, Wang Xiang brought the chessboard, Tang Ning held the white stones, and Wang Xiang held the black stones. Zhou Yi had taught him how to play Go in the past, but that was when they were in Lingzhou, and the two of them passed the time playing Go during the long nights when they had no intention of sleeping. Tang Ning had never paid attention to learning it, and was only half-skilled. Not long after the first game, he was killed by Wang Xiang and was thrown into disgrace, and he had to admit defeat in a miserable manner. After that, she played 4 games in a row, but Tang Ning didn't win any of them. Although winning or losing in chess is not the key, she still doesn't feel comfortable if she keeps losing. After the last game, Tang Ning packed up the chess pieces and said, "I'm not good at chess as an official. If Wang Xiang thinks about it, he might as well find someone else." The Prime Minister collected the chess pieces calmly and said, "Master Tang, don't be too humble. Master Tang's chess skills are superb, and the chess game is so big that I can't even match it." This was the first time that Tang Ning encountered someone who would win chess if he won, and would still sarcastically criticize others after winning chess. The old man Wang Xiang always meant something when he spoke. He meant one thing on the surface but another behind the scenes. Tang Ning didn't like talking to such people the most. He was disgusted by reading the memorials these days. When Wang Xiang came, I don't plan to come to Shangsha province. Anyway, in addition to here, he also has the official department and the cavalry camp to go to. Emperor Chen's 10,000 heavy cavalry had been formed 2 months ago. After the martial arts competition is over, he will rush to the northwest with Wu Jinshi. Tang Ning didn't understand before that Wanyan's life on the grassland was not easy. The reason why they repeatedly harassed and attacked Chen Chu was because they were squeezed out by others and had no room. The Sushan people were not the only nomadic tribes on the grassland. The largest tribe among them was a certain tribe called the Black Barbarians. The combat power is not inferior to that of the Sushan people, and they live deep in the grassland. The Wanyan tribe provokes Chen Chu and Hyman at the same time. This is good news for Chen state. Across the Sushan people, Hyman poses no threat to Chen state. With Hyman's restraint, Wanyan department cannot devote all its energy to deal with Chen Chu. On the contrary, the threat to them from the western region was greater. Zioan didn't know what happened in the past 3 years, and he expanded like crazy after taking medicine. Many small countries in the western region sent signals to Chen Guo for help. Emperor Chen and the court were very interested in this. In order to move, Italy united with many small countries in the western region to unite and attack Zioan from both inside and outside. In dealing with Wani Umbu, they tasted the benefits of supporting a puppet and planned to use the same tactics to deal with Zioan. Of course, the premise of all this is that the grassland is resolved in advance so that Chen Guo can spare enough energy. These two things must be planned slowly and smoothly, but something unexpected happened in the court today. In the morning court, Prime Minister Wang was uncharacteristically gentle. He impeached Academician Zhang with fierce words. The content of his impeachment was also very strange. There were so many affairs in the court every day. As the Prime Minister, he only impeached Zhang Dexioshi for neglecting to discipline Prince Run. Zhang Dexioshi had been a clean official all his life, so how could he bear this grievance? The two elderly men over 50 years old almost fought in the court. Later, it was only after the emperor persuaded them that the two stopped fighting. Zhang Dexioshi left in anger, and Zhao Yuan suffered. He was caught by him and made him recite books for 2 hours. When he came to the Tang family, his voice was hoarse. Zhao Yuan looked at Tang Ning and said helplessly, "Sir, save me, the Dexioshi is crazy. He wants me to read books for 4 hours every day, and he has to watch it in person." Tang Ning didn't know what hatred there was between Wang Xiang and Zhang Dexioshi. He had to use this little thing to make him lose face in front of the civil and military officials, but it was not entirely a bad thing to force Zhang Dexioshi to force Zhao Yuan to spend 4 hours reading every day in the future. The throne is so important, it can't be obtained by making a few bowls of soup and picking up a few girls. Taking a different approach is just to let him overtake others when he starts behind. How far he can go in the end depends on his own strength. Even he has to doubt whether Wang Xiang did it on purpose. Tang Ning looked at him and said regretfully, 4 hours are not much. You and Zhang Dexioshi should study hard during these days. Don't forget to make soup for your father every day. Zhao Yuan trembled and turned pale. He felt that his life was bleak and his future was bleak. Fang family, Fang Hong wondered, what happened to Wang Xiang? Did Zhang Dexioshi offend him? Fang Zhe smiled and said, it's better to let Zhang Dexioshi pay more attention to Prince Run. He can't be a good emperor just by making soup and making women happy. Zhang family. Zhang Yan, the Minister of Rights, was furious and said, Prime Minister Wang is too much of a bully. Has my Zhang family ever offended their Wang family? Grand Secretary Zhang, who had been furious in the court, was now quiet. He looked thoughtful and muttered, people named Wang never offend people easily. What does this mean this time? Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 688. Chapter 685 of the main volume of Ruyi Little Man, Thunder on the Ground Update 10. Zhang Yan was startled when he heard this, and asked, does it mean that the king, the drunkard, does not care about wine? Academician Zhang was pacing in the courtyard with a thoughtful expression on his face but did not speak. Two unusual things happened in the Zhang family these days. One was that Zhang Yan, who was supposed to spend his whole life in Zhongsha province, inexplicably took the position of Minister of Rights. The other was that Zhang Yan, who had always cherished his wings, unexpectedly Wang Xiang, who was willing to conflict with others, suddenly attacked him in the court, but the reason was just because of a trivial matter. King Run is playful, he has long since given up teaching him, and doesn't care much about him on weekdays. Even His Majesty and concubine Shu didn't say anything about it. As a prime minister, there is no way he has to fight against him when he is full. He looked at Zhang Yan and asked, "Last time you said that Fang Hong, the Minister of Civil Affairs, was showing favor to my Zhang family." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "If it weren't for Fang Shangshu, no one would be able to take my turn in the position of the Ministry of Rights." Fang family, Prince Run, Prime Minister Wang. Archbishop Zhang murmured in a low voice. Suddenly he seemed to remember something. He looked at Zhang Yan and asked, "Do you know that besides Ying Ying, the other two people who are following Prince Run are, a little girl, what is her identity?" Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "One is the granddaughter of the Wang Xiang, and the other seems to be the granddaughter of General Bai." Prime Minister Wang, Prime Minister Wang's granddaughter. Academician Zhang sat down on the table with a look of shock on his face and said in shock, "Could it be?" Zhang Yan looked at him and said in surprise, "Dad, what is it?" Academician Zhang thought for a long time, looked at Zhang Yan, and said, "Go and get ready to impeach Wang Xiang and his son Wang Bo in the court tomorrow. Zhao Yuan's good days are over. He spends most of his time reading and making soup, and has no time to tease the little girl." Wang Xiang's inexplicable behavior caused quite a stir in the court. All the officials knew was that he was in a bad mood. It was best not to provoke him these days. Tang Ning's way of looking at the problem was different from theirs. What kind of old fox was Wang Xiang? It was inexplicable how he could offend the Zhang family. Could it be that he had noticed something and took this opportunity to give them their next instructions? Zhao Yuan's filial piety is enough, but his ability is indeed a bit lacking. If he had a little bit of ability to govern the country, in Emperor Chen's eyes, he would be a shining piece of gold, the best candidate to inherit the throne. Of course, Wang Xiang was not in a hurry to make his words clear. If he lived to their age, he would not be in a hurry to take sides, but since he could make such a move, it was an invisible support for King Run to seize the throne. Thinking about it, it is impossible for him not to support it. With King Run's current power, it is not difficult to overthrow Chao Gang, but his method of seizing the air is too cunning and his performance is too low-key, so few people think in that direction. Tang Ning is almost no longer worried about Zhao Yuan, but the time left for him is only a little more than a year. During this period, the possibility of major changes in the Chen kingdom is too low. He is afraid that if Zhao Yuan takes over, he will have to leave the capital. Many years later. During this period, if I could do more for him, it would be worth it for him to call me sir. Tang Ning walked out of the study and prepared to go to Xiao Mansion to sit down. After Xiao Ju left, Mr. Xiao was the only one left in Xiao Mansion. Tang Ning would go to Xiao Mansion to sit for a while in her free time. He walked out of the house and saw a figure stumbling over. Tang Ning looked at Chen Zhou, who looked flustered, and asked in surprise, "You are so flustered, what's wrong?" Chen Zhou looked up at him with a pale face, licked his dry lips, and said in a trembling voice after a long time, Sir, urgent report from the north. General Xiao and his 500 soldiers were captured alive by Wanyan's tribe on the grassland. Yanbu summoned all the Sushan troops and carried out a public execution of General Xiao. Tang Ning looked at him blankly and asked, "General Xiao, which General Xiao?" Chen Zhou bit his lip and said, "General Xiao Ju Xiao." Tang Ning's mind went blank and she murmured, "When did it happen?" Chen Zhou said, it was at least 10 days ago." Without any warning, Tang Ning was stunned by the sudden news, and the sun above her head suddenly became dazzling. At the same time, the Xiao family. Mr. Xiao's body swayed, and the servants of the Xiao mansion hurriedly stepped forward to help him. He waved his hand to stop Xiao Fu, looked at the eunuch in the palace, and hissed, "What did you just say? Say it again." The eunuch said in a trembling voice, General Xiao and 500 soldiers were captured by the grassland people. They carried out a public execution of General Xiao 10 days ago. General Xiao is probably in danger. General Xiao sat down on the chair, closed his eyes, and said, "Everyone, get out." The servants of the Xiao mansion and the eunuch understood the mood of the white-haired man sending the black-haired man away. They raised their heads and slowly withdrew. General Xiao was the only one left in the room. He opened his eyes, and 2 lines of thick tears fell from his eyes. Lu family. Lu Ding learned about this incident from a young general, and he didn't come back to his senses for a long time. His face turned pale, he looked at the man and said, "You must not let Yair know about this matter." Boom! The screen on one side of the room fell down. Lu Ya walked out from behind the screen, looked at Lu Ding, and asked in confusion, "Dad, is this true?" Lu Ding looked at her and sighed. Royal study room. On the ground in front of the hall, memorials were scattered all over the floor. Emperor Chen looked gloomy and did not speak for a long time. The eunuchs in the hall held their breath and did not dare to breathe. Wei Jian looked at Emperor Chen, his face complicated, and he said, "Your Majesty." Emperor Chen stretched out his hand to stop him from continuing, and said grimly, "Pass the order down, all the enemy prisoners captured in the north, regardless of gender, age, or young, will be beheaded, and their heads will be built into a jingguan and placed north of Yinshan Mountain. I will also let them see that they killed 1 person from my Chen state, and one day, I will slaughter their entire Sushan clan." Except for a eunuch who responded, only Emperor Chen's grim voice echoed in the hall. 3 days after the news from the north came, Tang Ning did not go out for 3 days. The court and the people were excited, and Emperor Chen was furious, and he even issued an order to kill all the prisoners standing in the Jingguan. 10,000 heavy cavalry and nearly 100,000 auxiliary troops were ready to go within 3 days. Tang Ning did not go to the Xiao family or the Lu family. He only knew that the day after the news entered the capital, Lu Ya moved into the Xiao family as a widow. This news came suddenly and caught Tang Ning off guard. It took several days for the news to come back from the north. According to the time calculation, the public execution of Xiaoju by the Wanyan tribe has ended. Tang Ning sat in the study, took a sip of tea to moisten his lips, and felt upset. Zhong Yi, Su are you, and Tang Yao Yao stood in the yard and looked in the direction of the study. Tang Yao Yao gritted her teeth and was about to go in, but was stopped by Zhong Yi. She shook her head gently and said, "Let my husband be alone." Tang Yao Yao stopped and paced in the yard for half an hour, looking at the study from time to time. At a certain moment, Qing walked in from outside, holding a letter in her hand, and said, "There is a letter from my son-in-law." "I'll take it in." Tang Yao Yao took the letter from her and walked in quickly. She walked into the study, put the letter on the table, and said, "There is a letter." Tang Ning raised her head and asked casually, "Who wrote it?" Tang Yao Yao said, "It's unsigned." Tang Ning opened the unsigned letter and took out the letter paper. The words on the paper were ugly and familiar. He looked at the letter, his face gradually changed. After reading the letter, he stood up suddenly and said happily, "I love you to death." Tang Yao Yao was surprised and said, "Who do you love?" "Love you." Tang Ning hugged her, kissed her heavily on the face, grabbed her hand, and said, "Go to Xiao Mansion." Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 689. Today, 22,000 plus updates have been completed. About a month ago, I received a message from the editor-in-chief saying that I could sign a contract with a great writer, and then sent an application form. As a salted fish, I was naturally excited to hear this news. I jumped up and down, and I wanted to do 10 backflips to calm down. After calming down, I felt that if I didn't do something, I would be sorry to the readers, not to mention myself. After thinking about it carefully, I decided to burst out 10 chapters to thank everyone. Among the authors I know, my hand speed is very slow. I can't compare with those great writers who update 10,000 or 20,000 words a day. In order to accumulate these chapters, I return to my hometown 5 days in advance. Every day, I code from getting up in the morning to 11 o'clock in the evening. Except for eating and taking a lunch break, I basically code. My requirement for myself is that every chapter must have a joke or a gag. After all, when people read my books, many people just like to read these funny things. If I ask too much, it is common for me to get stuck. I stumble and stumble every day from morning to night. In addition to daily updates, I can save about 1 or 2 chapters. I haven't saved enough until today, the 4th. Fortunately, I will work hard today and finally don't have to be a dog. Readers who have followed the last book should find that when I was writing Xiaoao, I occasionally posted a feeling. Because of my indifferent attitude towards this book, I think those who like it will keep reading it, and those who don't like it can't keep it. I almost never posted this thing. Today, I posted this time for the first time. First, I want to report to you the status of writing, and second, I want to talk about the plan to complete the book of Ruyi. I know that many readers care about this. Ruyi has written 1.7 million words so far, and the outline has been more than half, and the word count has also been more than half. I estimate that the word count is about 3 million. The completion time should be at the end of the year, at the latest in the first half of next year. The original timeline for the completion of the book was 1 or 2 years after the 3-year agreement with Li Tianlan ended. Some readers may think that there is still a lot of content to be written later, such as expanding the map, conquering another continent, and dominating the world. Although this can make a lot more money, it is not what I want. I just think that Su Mei is so beautiful and Yao Yao is so cute. How can I bear to watch them grow old? Why not let time freeze when they are the most beautiful? This may be my obsession. Xiaoao is like this, Ruyi is like this, and the next book may still be like this. Some authors like to write real things, I like to write fairy tales, beautiful things, let them be beautiful forever. This is the plan to finish the book. Finally, I will insert a message. In order to make the great gods of Xianyule more prestigious, the Book Friends group launched a crowdfunding Silver Alliance activity. The top 20 readers of the crowdfunding amount can get a set of out-of-print exquisite bookmarks and signed postcards. Now half of the money has been raised. If you are willing to add a little firewood to the fire, add the group number in the introduction to join the group and find the administrator Xiao Mint. If you are in the WeChat group, also find Mint. Book friends who are not willing or are financially tight, please ignore this insertion and just read the book. That's about it. I have been typing continuously these days and really don't want to look at the computer. Let's stop here today. Xiaorong, April 4, 2019. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiaorong. Chapter 690. Tang Yaoyao was shocked by his sudden forced kiss. She stood there with a blushing face and said shyly, if you kiss me again next time, I will beat you. Tang Ning didn't have time to listen to her words at all, so she dragged her outside. The blush on Tang Yaoyao's face had not faded, and she hurriedly said, "What's wrong?" Tang Ning said, "It's too late to explain, let's go to Xiao's house first." At the entrance of Xiao Mansion. Ever since the news about young Master Xiao reached the capital, General Xiao had closed his door to thank guests, not seeing outsiders, and blocking out those who came to the Xiao Mansion to offer comfort and condolences. Everyone naturally understood this. General Xiao twice gave away his white-haired man to his black-haired man. No one could understand his sadness. Miss Lu, who has already stepped into the Xiao family, is naturally not an outsider. She has been accompanying General Xiao these past 2 days. When Tang Ning and Tang Yaoyao walked to the door of the Xiao mansion, the concierge of the Xiao mansion showed a tangled look on his face and said, "General Tang, the master said that we won't see any outsiders these days. How about I go in and ask?" If it were anyone else, he would have shut him out a long time ago, but the relationship between Mr. Tang and his young master was unusual, so he had to change his mind temporarily. "No, I'm in a hurry. I'll go in by myself." Tang Ning waved her hand and strode in with Tang Yaoyao. The concierge did not stop him. He sighed and said loudly, "General Tang, please remember to advise our master." Within the Xiao family, Lu Ya was dressed in plain clothes, with long waterfall-like hair tied up high in a woman's bun. She was kneeling in the ancestral hall. Her face was pale and bloodless, and her pupils had lost focus, as if her soul had been pulled out. Mr. Xiao walked in and said in a hoarse voice, "I asked the kitchen to cook some food. You can eat some." Lu Ya shook her head and said, "I'm not hungry." Mr. Xiao said, "You haven't eaten for 2 days." Lu Ya said, "I want to spend more time with him here." Mr. Xiao looked at her, pondered for a moment, and said, "Go away. You haven't entered my Xiao family yet, so you are not considered the Xiao family's daughter-in-law. Don't delay you because of the Xiao family." Lu Ya raised her head and said, "Since we are engaged, I, Lu Yasheng, am a member of the Xiao family and will be a ghost of the Xiao family when I die. When I die in battle, please ask my father to bury me and him together." Mr. Xiao sighed and said, "Why are you doing this?" "I'm going to the northwest, to the place where he once fought." Lu Ya stood up and said, "Dad is alone in the capital, so he must take care of himself." "I'm not allowed." Mr. Xiao looked at her and said seriously, "The people who are no longer gone are gone. Those who are alive should live well. He doesn't want you to do this either." Lu Ya smiled and did not refute, but the belief in her eyes remained firm. At this moment, a voice came from outside the door. Tang Ning strode in and said, "Xiao Ju is not dead, and you don't have to go and die. He is alive and well. He is eating mutton and drinking kumis at Wanyan department." Lu Ya and Mr. Xiao turned around at the same time. Mr. Xiao looked at him and said in shock, "What did you say?" Tang Ning looked at the two of them and said, "Xiao Ju is not dead." Mr. Xiao looked at him, and after a moment, he shook his head and said, "If Lord Tang is here to comfort me, there is no need to do this." Tang Ning shook her head and said, "It's true that he was once publicly executed, but he was saved. The person who saved him was a friend of mine. I just received her letter." Mr. Xiao looked overjoyed, grabbed his arm and asked, "Seriously?" In order to make them believe it, Tang Ning nodded and said, "The person who saved him is the 4th princess of Wanyan department. She and I are friends. Should you believe it now?" Lu Ya's complexion returned to rosy, but 2 lines of tears fell from her eyes. Mr. Xiao looked up to the sky and laughed, with tears in his eyes. He strode forward, threw Xiao Ju's spiritual tablet on the ground, crushed it under his feet, and said with a loud laugh, "Okay, okay. Xiao Ju is such a bastard." Tang Ning reminded him many times not to be too arrogant on the battlefield, but he just didn't listen. If he was caught this time, he would be publicly executed. If the grassland people really cut him down, it would fulfill his dream of leaving his name in history. The news of his death brought tears to many people, including Tang Ning. The next time they saw him, they would not be able to bear the sadness that Tang Ning had felt in the past 2 days unless they gave him a good beating. Mr. Xiao and Lu Ya experienced great joy after great tragedy, and their emotions were extremely unstable. Tang Ning did not stay in the Xiao mansion longer. He and Tang Yaoyao walked out of Xiao mansion, holding her hand, and when they walked to the street, they realized something was wrong. He turned to look at Tang Yaoyao, who looked straight at him with a pair of beautiful big eyes. Fourth Princess Wanyan, a very good friend, Tang Yao Yao looked at him and asked with a smile, "Are you talking about that little wild horse on the grassland?" Tang Ning froze on the spot, thought for a while, and said, "You go back alone first. I want to go to the palace and report this to your majesty." After saying that, he turned his head and strode towards the entrance of the palace. Wan Yanyan's letter not only brought news about Xiaoju, but also related to Chengguo's national economy and people's livelihood. In the imperial study room, Emperor Chen looked at him in surprise and asked, "Xiaoju is not dead?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "He was rescued by the fourth princess of Wanyan department." Fourth Princess Waini Umbu, Emperor Chen asked with a trace of doubt on his face, "Why did the fourth Princess Waini Umbu want to save him?" Tang Ning said, "Your Majesty, you don't know that I had dealings with this fourth princess on my way to Chu last time. She is different from other Khans. She hopes that the Han people and their Sushan people can live in peace and stay away from war. This time, she saved Xiaoju and 500 soldiers, which is a signal to us." Emperor Chen thought about it carefully and said in surprise, "You mean, if she unifies the Sushan tribes, the grassland and Chen will be able to live in peace and there will be no more war?" Tang Ning raised his head and said, "I can't guarantee this, but I can guarantee that only if she sits on the position of Khan, we can negotiate with the grassland. If the eldest prince and the third prince succeed to the throne, the situation will be even more unfavorable to us." Emperor Chen thought about it and nodded, "You are right. If we can help her sit on the position of Khan, it will be of great benefit to us. Without the threat of the Sushan people, we will have enough energy to deal with the western regions." Tang Ning bowed and said, "Your Majesty is wise." Emperor Chen looked at him and said, "This matter is extremely important. It concerns the future situation of several countries. I am not at ease if I leave it to others. I plan to give this task to you. Xiaoju is at Wanyan Yan's place. Just send someone to pick him up." Tang Ning didn't even think about going by himself. He looked up at Emperor Chen and said, "This matter is of great importance. I am afraid that I will fail your Majesty's trust." Emperor Chen shook his head and said, "If even you can't do it, who else can?" Tang Ning shook his head and said, "I have never led troops." Emperor Chen said, "I will let the border troops assist you with all their strength. Everything depends on you. In addition, you also bring the 100,000 troops including these 10,000 cavalry." He looked at Tang Ning and said, "Moreover, you are familiar with the fourth princess of the Wanyan tribe. In an extraordinary moment, extraordinary means can be used." Tang Ning looked at him and said in surprise, "Extraordinary means, what means?" "Use the means you are best at." Emperor Chen looked at him and said, "For example, turn her into your fifth wife." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 691. Chapter 687 of the main text of the Ruyi Young Man, Kindness. Tang Ning looked up at Chen Huang and couldn't believe that such shameless words came out of his mouth. What does it mean that he is good at this? This is obviously a mouthful. Zhao Man is already full of resentment about his position. If Wei Nianyan jumps in line again, Zhao Man will hate him to death. Tang Ning cupped her hands and said, I am not good at this method." Emperor Chen waved his hand and said, "There is no need to be modest. You are handsome and knowledgeable. You can even win the most beautiful woman in the capital. How can a mere barbarian princess escape from you?" Tang Ning said with difficulty, "Your Majesty, you don't know that those people on the grassland wear sheepskin and don't like to take a bath. I will not use my hands." Emperor Chen looked at him and said sincerely, "This is for the sake of the overall situation. I can only wrong you. Don't worry, if this matter can be done, it will save our Chen country from the biggest trouble of the grassland. I will reward you when you come back. You are 10 first-class beauties." Tang Ning hurriedly said, "I thank your Majesty for your kindness, but there are already enough wives in my family, and it is beyond our means. Please take back your Majesty's orders. There are already quite a few wives in the house, and with the addition of 3 maids who are still married, Tang Ning has to think about her body and kidneys. Although the little wild horse is good, he is not good at riding and can't control it. Chen Huang shook his head and said, since you don't want to go, forget it. It happens that only Wang Xiang is left in Shangsha province. You can stay and help him. Tang Ning bowed and said, I obey your order. Stay back. Emperor Chen waved his hand and seemed to be talking to himself. The women from the western regions are beautiful. I don't know if Xiaoan has a princess. There is one in Chu state, but it's a pity that she was scattered by Wanyan tribe on the grassland. We have captured the troops, I don't know what's going to happen now. After he finished speaking, he saw Tang Ning standing there, not leaving yet, and asked in confusion, why aren't you leaving yet? Tang Ning raised her head and said, I am concerned about the situation in the grassland. Your Majesty just said what happened to the grassland. Emperor Chen thought for a moment and asked, did I just say grassland? Tang Ning nodded and said, Your Majesty said that the Princess of Chu was dispersed by the Wanyan tribe on the grassland. Tell me this. Chen Huang said, this is the intelligence from the spies ahead. The third prince of the grassland led 50,000 troops and dispersed the 10,000 troops led by Princess Changning of the Chu state. Princess Changning and her subordinates are now missing. He looked at Tang Ning and said, why do you care about Chu state's affairs? Go to Shangsha province as soon as possible. The prime minister is old. You should help him share more of Shangsha province's affairs. Tang Ning stood there and said, I thought about it just now and decided to go to the grassland. Chen Huang looked at him and said in surprise, didn't you just say you didn't want to go? I am ashamed. Tang Ning lowered her head and said in shame, I should not only think about my own selfish interests and ignore the overall situation. The North needs me, and I am duty-bound. Emperor Chen glanced at him in surprise and said, it's best if you think this way, then the fourth princess of Wanyan department. Tang Ning bowed and said, I must try my best. Emperor Chen nodded with satisfaction and said, I asked the Ministry of War to prepare. You also go back to clean up. You will set off today. Since Chen Huang had already planned to cooperate with Wang Yanyan, the imperial edict to massacre the prisoners of war that was sent out 2 days ago would naturally require 800 miles to be taken back immediately. Junwu's joke is relative. As long as he has enough chips, the emperor can take back what he said. When Tang Ning returned home, Zhongyi and Su Ru heard the news and were already waiting for him at home. Zhongyi walked over quickly and said, Ms. Sir, Yao Yao said that General Xiao is fine. Is this true? Tang Ning nodded and said, it's true, he is still alive and well. That's great. Su Ru said with a smile on her face, this way Sister Lu doesn't have to be sad. Tang Ning looked at them and said, in a few days, I may go to the grassland. Why? Zhongyi's expression changed slightly and he asked, General Xiao is fine, why did my husband go to the grassland? It's so dangerous and chaotic there. Of course, Tang Ning didn't want to see the scenery of the desert on a whim. Xiaoju was drinking and eating meat at Wang Yanyan's place, but Li Tianlan didn't know where she was. Although Tang Ning believed in her ability, how could he rest assured if she didn't go and see it in person? After listening to his explanation, Zhongyi glanced at him, nodded and said, in that case, then go ahead, sir, and we will wait for you to come back. If your wife doesn't feel sorry for her, no one will. Tang Ning has a reason to go this time, and Zhongyi and the others also express their understanding. Of course, even if he has 10,000 cavalry and an army of 100,000, he still has to bring a few people with him. Chen Zhou must be brought with him. Having him in Tang Ning will save him a lot of trouble. Old Zheng also has to be brought with him. Such a bodyguard cannot be found even with a lantern. As for the old beggar, because his martial arts is higher, he is still allowed to. After all, it was better to stay at home and take care of the house. Tang Ning had many enemies in the capital. After he left, what he was most worried about was his family. He obtained some information on the grassland from the Ministry of War. Before he could read it, the butler of the Xiao mansion came to the door and handed over an invitation, saying that it was Mr. Xiao who invited him. There has been a false alarm in the Xiao mansion these days. Mr. Xiao hosted a banquet in the manor. The attendees, except Lu Ding, the Minister of War, were all old members of the Xiao family. Over the years, the subordinates who have left Mr. Xiao have spread all over the 16th Guards. This is one of the reasons why no one dares to make trouble in the Xiao mansion even if the Xiao mansion declines. As for why Lu Ding was able to come, it was naturally because the Xiao and Lu families had become in-laws, and could be considered a family. During the banquet, Mr. Xiao stood up and raised his glass to Tang Ning, saying, "This glass is for General Tang." Tang Ning stood up hurriedly and said, "I don't deserve it, I don't deserve it." Mr. Xiao said solemnly, "If it weren't for General Tang, my Xiao family would have no descendants now. General Tang deserves this glass." Mr. Xiao insisted, so Tang Ning had to return the toast. When he put down the glass, Lu Ding also stood up and raised his glass, saying, "This glass is also for Lord Tang." Lu Ding had the same reason as Mr. Xiao, so Tang Ning was too lazy to refuse. He raised his glass and drank the wine in the glass. He said, "Xiao Ju and I are friends. This is what we should do. General Xiao and Lord Lu don't have to be polite." Mr. Xiao shook his head and said, "Friendship is friendship, favor is favor. I will remember your kindness to the Xiao family in my heart. I will repay this kindness. In the future, if General Tang has any orders, the Xiao family will not refuse." Lu Ding glanced at him, said, "My Lu family also appreciates this favor." Tang Ning smiled and said, "In this case, then I won't be polite. In fact, I just need your help." Old Master Xiao said, "General Tang, please feel free to speak." Tang Ning said, "Tang has many enemies in Beijing. This time I was ordered to leave Beijing for important matters. After I leave, I am worried that they will attack my family. I hope that Old Master Xiao and General Lu can help take care of them." Old Master Xiao looked serious and said, "General Tang, don't worry about this matter. If your family loses a hair during your absence, I will bring my head to see you." Tang Ning hurriedly said, "Old Master Xiao, you are too serious, too serious." Old Master Xiao was a military general. What he said was like a military order, and it was a bit unrealistic. But no matter what, Tang Ning had already felt his determination and was finally able to leave with peace of mind. There are still many families that he needs to say hello to before leaving. There are the Xiao family, the Ling family, and the Lu family in the military, the Fang family and the Song family in the civil, and there is also his father-in-law who is the Jing Xiaoyin. There is really nothing to worry about. Old Master Xiao looked at Tang Ning and suddenly said, "General Tang will meet that unfilial son when he goes to the north this time, right?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "I should see him." Old Master Xiao looked at him, a hint of sternness appeared on his face, and said, "I hope that when General Tang sees him, he will help me beat him up. As long as you don't beat him to death or cripple him, you can beat that unfilial son." Tang Ning smiled and said, "Even if Old Master Xiao doesn't say so, I will do the same."